you very much. No pressure now, time's rattling on. This is my office in 1959. Whitsun, I wasn't there then, but I was crawling around somewhere. Catherine very kindly mentioned that I'd been appointed to the Canal River Trust as their National Heritage Manager, and indeed that's true, but I won't say much about the quarter of a century before that, when I was the Heritage Manager for the British Waterways Board. This is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to rattle through, identify what our heritage assets are, then I want to tell you something about how we manage and repair them, and then end with something about some new directions that we're developing. So, first of all, who are we? Well, we replaced British Waterways in July 2012, and we look after 2,000 miles of waterways in England and Wales, but not Scotland any longer, sadly. We're one of the UK's largest charities, and we're funded by our own property business, by a government grant, licensing, and a cocktail of other things. And we get a lot of money from HLF as well. And importantly for me, we have a charitable object to protect and conserve heritage. So, here's a collage of the wonderful historic environment that we look after. You can take it from me, there's no other canal network on earth that has as much heritage as we have here in England and Wales. I can guarantee that. It's a wonderful, wonderful environment. And there are two types of inland waterways that we look after. River navigations, which have been made navigable, as you can see from the diagram, with engineering features and water levels maintained to enable boats to pass. The remains of river navigations are very fragile. There are lots of mills around. They're not a waterway structure, but they have a lot to do with rivers, river navigations, and arguments about water supply. There's archaeology in the form of flash lock remains, and we have one turf-sided lock that still exists on the Kennet and Avon, and you can still find paddle and reimer weirs on the Thames, but not many of them these days. So the other type of waterway we look after is a man-made canal, which is the engineering was based on the earlier river navigations, and you can see some of the features here in this diagram. Most importantly and crucially, water has to be fed and led into a canal. It doesn't occur naturally, as you probably realise. So it's important to understand the history. You know, this is a real handmade environment dating from the middle of the 18th century onwards. Gangs of sweating men and horses, no mechanical aids to begin with, and took years to build a canal. And canals were a world that were built around horses, actually. There's a lot of important features that remain that are to do with horses, not anything else. But they're also about water. This is one of the reservoirs that we own, with a low-tech feeder channel leading into the canal. And I was looking at this last night, and I just noticed that that's the A5 on the right. The A5 has been pushed out slightly by that head bank, which I'd not noticed before. It's about water, it's about earth. Turley cutting, designed by Telford. Great piece of engineering. You wouldn't dream of doing it like this today, because it's almost kind of one-in-one, but and we have lots of problems with it, but you know, these were pioneering engineers who were trialling new things. Here's another great bank, embankment by Telford, which he had problems with, and so do we, but a great piece of engineering nevertheless. And structures, lots of these. I'm going to rapid fire through a few. Aqueducts, you know what they do, they carry water and boats across rivers mainly. Locks, lots of these. This is a scheduled monument. We've got over 600 locks, listed locks in England, and quite apart from others that aren't. Tunnels, beautiful tunnel this one, with a horse path, again going over the top because you can't get the horse through the tunnel, there's no towpath. And buildings, quite a variety, stables, horses again, dry docks, which are quite specialised buildings. This one's a gauging dock where boats were gauged. Dwellings, we've sold a number off, but we still have quite a few, and maintenance yards, the real kind of focal points of the old canal companies, some of which are, wonderful collections of listed buildings that are still in use. And we have docks and ports as well, not on the scale that Peter just showed us, but this is Gloucester Docks, which has been regenerated from the 1980s onwards, and is really quite a success story in the reuse of these splendid corn warehouses. There are former industrial buildings associated with canals as well. We tend not to own them, but they obviously make an impact on our operations. This is fairly much in the middle of Birmingham at Warwick Bar. We have wartime structures, the canals of southern England in particular, littered with this stuff for people who are interested. And we even own a Beaufort's gun platform, bottom right. I don't know how on earth we inherited that, but there it is. And boats. This is Purton Boats Graveyard, which is the largest one in Europe, and this is a scheduled monument that is quietly mouldering away, with an agreement with Historic England to let it moulder away because no one could think of what else to do with it. Unfortunately, the barbecue crowd like to get down there in the summer, and well, you know what you put on a barbecue to turn it into charcoal. Designated assets, right. We have the third largest collection of listed buildings after the Church of England and the National Trust. And we've got scheduled monuments, lots of conservation areas, some very long ones actually, probably not as long as the Settle and Carlisle, but still some very long ones. And our operations are affected by other designations which you can see there. We also have our own World Heritage Site at Pontcysyllte on the Llangollen Canal. So, a rapid tour through some heritage assets. Now I want to talk about how we manage all that wonderful stuff. We've got boots on the ground. I've got a great team of heritage advisors. There's at least a couple of them here today, which is great. And increasingly we work with volunteers as well. Volunteers can bring real expertise. We've had a retired professor of forensic medicine doing research on canal liners, which is, it's just fantastic really to have that kind of resource helping us. We've got a lot of underpinning data. My first job when I started on the waterways in the 1980s was to go around and find things that needed listing and try and get them listed. We're now kind of revisiting that with the help of volunteers and updating those surveys that I did all those years ago in a world before digital cameras and computers and all that. Compliance and reporting. I do a lot of, we do a lot of measuring of what goes on the ground, and I produce a report every year that reflects that. And I'm very proud of our record in compliance for works to designated assets. Museums and archives, not direct. I don't directly manage these myself, but they are an important resource for, looking at what happened before, especially if we want to go and do something there again. And the great repository of memories and artifacts as well. It's not so clear how you manage the preservation of historic working practices that, are still current today. That looks like a fairly new chain on that windlass to me, but, someone's going to say before long, you can't operate that any longer, it's not safe, and, that will be lost as well, although the winch will remain in situ, I hope. But open days can keep heritage alive. We're bringing a blacksmith here and there to demonstrate traditional techniques in our maintenance yards where we have forges. Health and safety, have to mention it. Big management issue for us, obviously. We're inviting the public onto, what is an inherently dangerous environment in some respects. Do you go for the chain link solution or something a bit more subtle with warning notices. You know, these are balances that have got to be struck and worked out, and we do a lot of that all the time. We also manage heritage at risk. This is a guillotine lock at Kings Norton that we repaired and got it off it's a scheduled monument actually, the scheduled monument at risk register. Very pleased about that. Not so pleased about this. We just repaired this bridge last summer, and literally within days the graffiti vandals were back. We do report this as you know, it is criminal activity and we do report it, but people don't often get caught doing it, of course. Bridge bashing is another management problem for us. These two didn't get away, so we know who they were. But again, you know, it costs us at least well over £1 million every year, to repair these modest little structures that deserve better treatment. And it's not a new problem. This is our old friend the A5 again, with a lorry from Manchester, by the look of it, and it's taken out the entire flipping parapet. I think it was, judging by the way it fell into the lock, it was probably that lorry driver's lucky day, actually. We do archaeology as well. Here we are looking for an allegedly buried barge on the Droitwich Canal, which, needless to say, turned out not to be there. But it's still worth looking. And another thing, you know, another aspect of management is over time, one needs to re-evaluate heritage. That aqueduct on the New Junction Canal, 1905, made of steel, guillotine gates to stop the river water rising up and entering the canal. Not listed, you know, I look at that and I think, yeah, it probably should be listed. But moving on to the 1970s, a colleague of mine asked me the other day if I remember the 1970s. Funnily enough, I do actually. I was a student then, and I had a Polish girlfriend as well. So I do remember those two things. But what I don't remember is a lot of good design from that maligned decade. But, you know, I look at these bridges every now and then. This is a lift bridge that's set skew, and it's quite a beautiful structure. And I start to think, well, you know, I think that could be listed as well, perhaps, you know. Right. We've identified the assets, or some of them, talked about management, now moving swiftly on to repairs. Very important, this obviously clearly linked to managing heritage, but, you know, we need to be clear that people know what they're doing and don't chop things out that they shouldn't be chopping out. So we go to a lot of trouble to help plan the works. And we insist on the highest quality. You know, the thing I'm probably most proud of is it's taken me 30 years, almost single-handedly at times, to get people to repair things properly. But now we do it really well, which is fantastic. I'm so pleased about that. And we bring in specialist skills when we need to. You know, there's a master mason there, there's a metalwork expert there as well on the other side, leading in an iron cramp in the traditional fashion. And we invest in training. You can get these people out of bed and get them doing things. Young people are fantastic. We have an ageing workforce in my organisation, and you know, we need to bring young people up to replace the older guys when they, you know, inevitably retire and call it a day. And we're doing that. We've got Heritage Skills scheme running, we've got apprenticeships, and it's great to see that happening. And an element of the training they do is purely about heritage. We also refurbish. We've got a refurbishment programme running for our cottages around the country. We've got a good conservation architect in-house who we work with on doing that. And going up the scale a bit, we develop, well, in partnership with developers, we repair and reuse historic buildings like this wonderful building in Wakefield, which is just down from the Hepworth Gallery and has really, you know, brought up this part of the waterfront there. New directions. I mentioned this earlier. We this gets a bit dry, but the Enterprise and Regulatory Reform Act 2013 set in place provisions for some management tools. I'll let you read those for yourself. We've been working with some of these heritage partnership agreements. We've been kind of working with since 2005-4 thereabouts, and the other things there, consent orders, certificates of lawfulness, we've been trialling. So we have heritage partnership agreements set up around the country. This is the biggest and most ambitious one we have for the Greater Manchester Canals, and largely due to the help and support of Paul Hartley and his colleagues in the Greater Manchester Councils. And you know, this is a living thing that we work with. It was set up under British Waterways. Obviously, we've taken it on. It belongs to us. Well, it's the same people involved. And, you know, a great thing to trial out. Local listed building consent orders, we've been looking at some of these. They work very well for a situation where you have a repeat number of structures that just need, you know, things doing to them as time goes on, and we know what they are. And so we're looking at having some of those. And we trialled a certificate of lawfulness of proposed works. We've trialled a couple actually, but this was on some lock repairs on the Shropshire Union at the back end of last year. A series of locks that worked, linked locks that worked okay. But the big thing for us is this, the National Listed Building Consent Order. I've been working for years on the notion of having a heritage partnership agreement with Historic England and the government. The Act, the ERR Act, provides the opportunity to actually have a national listed building consent order. And we've been developing this with DCLG and Historic England and DCMS for a few years now. It's only for certain works to functional structures owned by the Trust, and it's granted by the Secretary of State. It will mean consistency and will save time and money. And it's a partnership, as I've said, and it only applies to England. It won't work in Wales. And just to illustrate the point, a lot of our work is cyclical, repetitive. Lock gates get replaced every 25 years. That's a wonderful posed photograph with everyone in their Sunday best by the look of it. But again, the up-to-date photograph, you know, it's the same kind of thing going on. This time the children are safely penned in, so they're not going to fall off. But, you know, kids love this kind of thing. They'll stand there all day and watch people thumping things and craning gates in and out. Wonderful. But again, you know, cyclical. A lot of repairs to locks are things that we have to do over and over again. We understand what they are. They're not complicated, but, you know, they very often need listed building consent. So what we're saying is if we could have, you know, a pre-consent granted to us, then we could just get on and do this, and everyone would know what was happening. Bridges, again, you know, we have over 835 listed bridges in England alone, and they suffer exactly the same kind of problems over and over again, which you can see some of right here in this little drawing. So, the components of the NLBCO, the statutory instrument, that's the order that will be signed by the Secretary of State. It's on about its 5th draft at the moment with the CLG lawyers. We've got an underpinning set of conservation management principles which have been developed with Historic England and English Heritage prior to that, because, as I said, I've been working on this for quite a while. There's a scoping table. All this stuff's going to be on our website for those who are interested when it happens. There's a scoping table that provides guidance on what you can and can't do under the terms of the order. And then we have our own underpinning processes that we work with all the time with our engineering colleagues. However, consider this. For this order to proceed, it needs to pass through both Houses of Parliament. And my great concern, if you like, is that in these troubled times, Catherine's nodding her head the wrong way, I'm still optimistic because I have to be. And actually this is not, you know, this is a non-partisan, I hope non-controversial, apolitical kind of thing. It is deregulatory, but, you know, heritage management does have to evolve at times and move on. And, you know, I really think if it if this can't work for us, it can't work for anyone, probably. So, in summary, heritage is important. I don't need to tell any of you that. And our historic waterways are very much working heritage. It's an historic system. It needs careful understanding and management. We need to strike balances. Repairs need to be high quality. Partnerships are developing, and we're hopefully leading some of those new developments in heritage management. And last but not least, volunteers really do make a great contribution to our work. Thank you.